Really easy. Like 2, 3. It just, I'll have to see what it means.
Okay, so, let me pull up this problem, I guess.
You want to go to the rodeo or you want, I could split the ticket.
Share.
I think it'd be more fun. You can meet the clown. I met his dog today.
You can meet the clown.
Yeah, the rodeo plan.
Hey guys, the rodeo starts this week, just saying.
I have tickets.
Just one ticket, just by yourself?
Yeah, one ticket. Well, you know.
How expensive are tickets?
To the rodeo?
Yeah. Well, I got a free ticket because I work at work.
You'd be like, I have a family of 8 people. You just fly and work there for like 1 shift. And get your ticket and then can you share the ticket? Like, if you won't be there, someone else can go? Not what I thought.
Split the ticket in half.
No, like, I mean, you go and then you give the ticket to someone else and you leave and then they can go.
Yeah, and I've heard of that before. I think they call that.
Yeah, well, that's what we do back home. That's how we do it.
You're going to get deported again, Erica.
Oh, do you find like a hole in the fence? That's what we do too.
Well, we had a theory about stealing the puppy the other day.
I mean, it was her birthday. So
They were really cute and small.
That's good, right?
Okay, so, I wish I could just like, what?
Maybe.
I got it all.
Oh, I can't. That's good.
I just didn't. I didn't use it in formula.
All right, so you got your stuff up here. So let's look at this thing. So we got 1.8 million. I want to kind of frame this question. Frame a little better.
Excuse me, could you please get out of the screen share? Because that way I can see the board a little bit better. I can pin the video that shows the board.
Okay, I'll remind me if I don't do it, but I'll do it when I get to the board. I want to talk about it first.
Okay.
Will do though. Okay, so 1.8 million to install these panels. They're going to have a output capacity of 500 kilowatts, life expectancy of 20 years, plus the discount rate is 10%. What's the discount rate again?
Is it the cost of capital?
Cost of capital, what do you mean by that? Like an interest rate, but it's something that I want you guys to kind of have right off the tip of your tongue. So what is the discount rate? What does it mean? How do we use it? Rate of return. It is a rate of return. It's similar, but whose rate of return?
Investors.
The investors. That's right. It's the opportunity cost of funds. So on an individual level, what that number would be I think I can get this in an alternative investment, right? So the opportunity cost of funds is what you could have done if you didn't do what you did. Did I ever give you guys my Dr. Seuss version of opportunity cost? It's the thing you would have done if you didn't do what you did. That is opportunity cost. It's the thing you would have done if you didn't do what you did. It's the highest valued alternative. So in other words, if you go put your money into the solar panel thing, you're missing out on putting your money somewhere else. What is that thing? Well, that's up to you. That's where economics is kind of an art form. You guys need to determine what that would be for you. This problem gives it to us. Suppose that the discount rate is 10%. That's not given to us from the market. That's not because there's German bonds that are going for 10% we could have done. They don't tell us any of that. So it is truly the opportunity cost. In this particular case, for this company, is it or whatever, this is their opportunity cost of funds. It's what they could do with 1.8 million. I guess the university in this case, right? So they spent 1.8 million. They could have spent that 1.8 million on something else. What would they have gotten? They would have got 10%. So it's the opportunity cost of funds. So what's the difference? The discount rate is a rate of return, but it's the rate of return that's relevant to you. So there's a zillion different rates of return out there, right? So if I had put my money in Apple stock the last 5 years, I would have earned a X rate of return. If I go put my money into a certificate of depression at the local bank, they will give me a 1% rate of return, right? So they're all just rates of return. This is a special rate of return kind of reserved for economics class, I guess at this level. The discount rate, there is, I guess, one caveat when you get into money and banking class. The discount rate is something that the Federal Reserve lends money at to member banks. So, I mean, there are other characterizations of it, but here's really the opportunity cost. And the key point I want you guys to remember, this is an internally derived rate of return. It's what you think is relevant. So when you go out to work for your business with your big MBA degree, you don't automatically plug in a 10% for the discount rate, because that's what you remember from this problem in Managerial Econ class. The right discount rate to plug in is whatever's relevant to your particular situation. So when you go to your boss and your boss says, well, let's just throw 10% at it, you should question that and say, well, what is it? Is it 8%? Is it 5%? Is it 3%? What is the opportunity cost of funds?
I guess I don't know how do you even know what that is? Like, could you just work it out like a simple, like, put this in my list?
So a small business person that's running a pizza place on Main Street, they have an idea of what they'd like to do with their business, right? And so they might have a couple options. I think I could put it into a new beer venture, or I could upgrade my sound system and turn this into a dance place, right? Which one should I do? Well, you need to, the amount of money that you think you're going to make, obviously you're going to want to chase the one that you think is going to be most profitable. But what would those funds have gone to? So what else could I be doing with my money? That answer is going to vary on whoever's doing it. So as far as how you derive it, it's usually a gut feeling. Okay. So it can be very much a gut feeling. In other applications, it could be very calculated. So if you have a larger corporation that has $500,000 in a money market account of some sort that's earning 3.5% interest, we kind of know that that might be our opportunity cost of funds, right? Or we know that we can get that. We're trying to play things safe, let's say, at our business, and maybe we'll venture out, but what's this venture worth? I have an uncertain investment of doing something. What is the proper way to discount those funds? I could have gotten 3.5% by continuing to plow more money into my money market mutual fund under those circumstances, right? So their opportunity cost of funds might be 3.5%. And I can tell you right now, if you guys start doing some of these problems, maybe you saw, I can't remember exactly if you saw it as you worked through some of these, you change this from 10% to 3.5%, you get a dramatically different answer. Big time. I mean, it'll affect your answers in a significant way. Here's the real world glimpse, though. A lot of people will just throw a 10% at the board. And the reason that is that it's not too far off base, but for a lot of companies, you might be thinking of putting it into some growth stock funds in the stock market, and the historical average might be 8 to 12%, and so people think, well, it might be 8 1 year, 12 1 year, 10-year average, boom, ended up being maybe around 10%. Let's just use 10%. Because you can Mickey Mouse all day with it. At the end of the day, it is an assumption. But you will get different answers, yeah, I mean, possibly even at 8%, and then you can start doing some sensitivity analysis. Like, okay, I threw a 10% into the numbers. What if it was 7? Does that change my yes or no? Remember where we were going with the net present value is that if the net present value is greater than 0, what do? We go for it, right? And so now, as an executive, if this is a big deal and we're shelling out 1.8 million, let's go back and rerun the numbers with 7% and see if we still get the go for it, right? Because if all of a sudden we plug in a slightly different number and we knew that this one was a little hand wavy, right? It was a little soft. It wasn't like a hard, fast number, and it changes our yes or no, we have something to talk about at the board meeting tomorrow, right? And we have more data to say, hey, listen, this was a close call. 7% changes the numbers, 10% says let's go. What do you guys think? And then it's back to gut feeling. I mean, this is really art form. I mean, so you're not getting away from your gut, but you're using the data to make an informed decision. And so you start to establish your boundaries. And it's also a good double check for no-brainers. Like a lot of people think, oh yeah, the solar panels, yeah, that's a no-brainer. I mean, look, we're shelling out, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and this is going to last 20 years. We're going to help the environment, and blah 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 blah. It's a no-brainer. Well, is it a no-brainer? Now we have a tool to go back and say, well, I ran the numbers, and using this discount factor, even if I used a 5% or a 15%, we got something to talk about at our Tuesday board meeting. So, that help? Yes. Okay. All right. So that's an important number, kind of given to us in this example, just kind of thrown out there. So let me go to this answer here. What do you think? Tell me what you got going on here. I'll take this off. Keith. See, I gotta remember what screen I'm looking at. I got 3 different screens. Let's see, I think if I do stop screen share. Okay. So, what do you got here?
Well, it made more sense before everything was said.
Okay, that's fine. What direction were you going with it?
Well, with the break-even quantity formula,
Yeah.
I tried to plug in some numbers, and so I
Okay.
found the annual fixed cost is a 20th of the 1.8 billion. You got it for 20 years.
Okay.
And then I said that since it operates, if it's operating at capacity,
Yeah.
then the price is $50 an hour.
Okay, so you got the 500. The solar system's cranking out 500 kilowatts. If I had to pay for that, it'd be 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's $50.
Right.
Okay, good.
My marginal cost, that $5 is the 10%. The discount
And
rate.
capacity, okay.
And
All
so
right.
that's
And so break-even quantity, you got the 90,000. Annual fixed cost, where did that come from again?
it's $1.8 million was the fixed cost, and it's supposed to be good for 20 years, so I divided by 20.
Got it, okay. So, what else did you guys do? Thank you for putting that up. Shanita, what did you do?
I did the fixed cost, just like the fixed cost.
And what did you get?
I got 90,000 as well.
Okay.
And then
So did you work with him on it, or did you, which is okay, by the way, you guys can work on him, I'm just
I
curious.
did not. I worked with
So you took the same approach,
Yes.
okay?
Yes, I worked with Lisa.
Okay,
And then I divided the annual fixed cost by the 500 kilowatts. And then I got 180. And then from there,
okay,
I divided the 180 by the 10 cents per kilowatt, and I got 1,800 hours.
$1,800. Okay, Keith, what about you? What approach you take?
Actually, I didn't get 2,000. I got 1,800 hours.
What was your approach in general, though? Did you do something with
So I did the same thing with finding how much it costs per hour, and I got 50. And then I found out. So what else did I do? Okay, so
how to deal with the 1.8 million? These guys took the 1.8 million, divided it by the 20 years, and got the 90,000 per year on average.
So I tried to find how many hours there are, how many hours you could get with $1.8 million.
Okay.
And so if 1 hour is $50, then out of 1.8 million, I got 36,000 hours. So that's how much time I have for 20 years.
Okay. Okay. Let me keep going around here. Mohammed, what did you do? Huh? You didn't get to this one? Okay.
And so I hadn't finished.
Oh, go ahead.
I then divided the total number of hours over 20 years by 20, which got me to 1,800 hours per year.
Okay. All right, Clay?
The same condition.
Okay. Did anybody take a different approach than that? Brendan, Shanita? Erica, what did you do?
I do the same thing.
Same thing? So everybody's wrong? Okay, so let's talk about the time value of money. What did we learn last week in lecture? What does this chapter talk about in terms of the time value of money? It's worth more now than in the future, right? Sooner, something's worth more now than in the future. When do we shell out the 1.8 million? At the end of year 20, in the middle, predominantly at the beginning, right? Okay, and when do we reap the rewards? Throughout the whole thing, over the course of the 20 years. So by dividing 1.8 million by 20, what sort of weight are you putting on the time value of money? That it stays the same. You're putting an equal weight on that money over time, essentially, by using those simple averages. And that's where the MBA degree elevates you above that, right? That's what the average Joe does, and that's what you guys are in this class for, is to bring something more to the table. So money at different time periods has to be treated differently due to the time value of money. So what I recommend you do whenever you get a problem like this, and this will not be the last problem that you get like this. In fact, you can, well, not only for this class, but in real life. I mean, it's often that you have stuff that's spread over multiple years, whether you're buying a computer or a piece of equipment or whatever. It's labor, hours, and employees. They tend to be like today's time period. Like, I need to schedule my week for my employees this week. Well, here's the shifts. I know that I'm committing over the next 2 weeks, but buying a $1.8 million piece of equipment or something else, it's going to be spread over these time frames. And so you need to kind of come back to that formula. Now, I gave you kind of the simple side of it last time, which was true for money in every time frame. So when you go to dissect a problem like this, the first thing that I want you to do is to think about the dollar flows over the relevant time frame. What's the relevant time frame here? 20 years. So how I start a problem like this is to say time period 0. Time period 0 is today, now. I'm going to try to make this decision now. And then I'm going to go out to the 20 years. I'm going to go ahead and write this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oops. 10. That up there. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oops. Doing that. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay. So talk to me in terms of this timeline now, in terms of the cash flows that you're looking at. So if we invest in the solar panel, what are we shelling out in time period 0? Minus 1.8 million, good. So we got that time frame down. And then what are our benefits, right? So we kind of got marginal cost, benefits, right? What is the benefit of spending this? We are really investing in this piece of equipment. That piece of equipment's going to generate benefits for us over a 20-year time frame. Now, what are we going to get? Yes. We get the 10 cents a kilowatt hour that we're not spending that we would have spent on electricity. So one of the assumptions of this model is that electricity is going to stay at 10 cents a kilowatt hour. It would be a fairly easy thing to do with using a computer and an Excel spreadsheet to build in a rate of inflation, because that's very unlikely that if the electric company's charging 10 cents a kilowatt hour, is it likely to remain 10 cents a kilowatt hour for 20 years? No. Everything, just like everything else, is subject to inflation. So we might put a rate of increase of 3% a year, 2% a year. We're not doing that here, but I'm just saying a little dose of reality is that we might need to model that into it as well, that there might be price increases. So we've got $50. So what is the benefit here? What number goes here for the cash flow that we're receiving in time period 1, after 1 year? So this machine is generating how many kilowatts? 500. We would have paid 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So what are we effectively receiving because we didn't have to pay it? The $50, right? So we've got the 50 going here. And then we've got, the assumption is that that stays the same. 50, 50, da, 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 50. Now, is the solar panel worth anything in terms of resale value at the end of 20 years? Probably not. Again, in a different characterization, we might have a resale value. If you have an old collector car, you might have that, you shelled out $1.8 million today for a pretty nice car, maybe we're into airplanes now, and maybe it has a resale value of half that. Maybe it has a resale value of more than that, but that would be a cash flow here at the end of the time frame. So the most sophisticated investment schemes you can imagine can be boiled down to 3 steps. 1, the initial investment. The initial investment. That's time period 0. What are we shelling out? Number 2, what I call the operating flows. The operating flows. Every year we're having a cash flow come in of some size. Again, these sizes might vary. If we put that 3% inflation factor, then this one's going to be the second year, $51.50 with 3% inflation assumed into the model that it goes from $50, 1% of $50 is 50 cents, 50 cents times 3 at 3% inflation would give you $1.50. Electricity is going to cost $1.50 more the second year. And then we keep building that in. And so my point is that these cash flows that are positive could potentially change. Another thing that could be going on with operations is some sort of maintenance. We bought the solar panel for $1.8 million. The company gave us a 10-year warranty, but after that, the warranty expires. That was built into the price before. Maybe we'll have some maintenance going on. So maybe it'll cost us a little bit of money. Then we just take our $50, and if there was a $5 maintenance fee, then we only got $45 in year 12. So my point is you can add and subtract in any year according to what you're building into the model of the investment. So that's your operating flows. The last one is your terminal cash flow. Your terminal flow. At the end of the time frame, something's going on. Now you have your operating flow. Your operating flow for the very last year might be $50. But if we can sell this $1.8 million machine and we think, well, geez, we got to be able to get at least 200,000 because those solar panels will still be able to be recycled into something else. Now all of a sudden we have a sale value at the end of the 20th year that's worth something. These 3 things help frame the problem. Now we can apply the time value of money, and it's just easy math. And if we're using a computer, it's a click of a button. All we're going to do is discount those future sums according to our opportunity cost. Our opportunity cost was 10% in this case. So we go back to our present value formula that we had. The future value in year 1 is 50. 50 divided by 1 plus the interest rate of 10%. I'm going to write 10% even though you put 0.1, so it'd be 1.1. Raised to the number of time periods you're out, which is just 1. So raised to the 1 power, it's 50 divided by 1.1 gives you your answer. That's the present value of that 50 in time period 1. Then we jump to year 10, and it was 50. But you can't have a simple formula that captures all of this, so you treat all of year 10's money the same way. You take the future sum, you divide it by 1 plus the interest rate, you raise it to the number of periods that you're out. This is to the 10th power now. This $50 is going to be much less valuable than this $50. Is anybody comfortable putting that exponent on a calculator? Let's see what it is. So somebody do 50 divided by 1.1. And then let's do 50 divided by 1.1 raised to the 10th power.
At 19.2.
Is that this one?
Yes.
19.2? That's probably right.
The first one's 45. 45 cents.
45 and what?
45.
45.
I'm just confused on how.
So there's the big difference, right? So that's the time value of money. That's why we can't just simply average the two out. I mean, this is more than double in just the 10 years. When we start to get out 20, 30 years, it's next to nothing. It doesn't matter how big the number is. If you're at 30 years, that's why when you have a mortgage, maybe some of you have heard this, when you go out to buy a house, how much money you're actually putting towards your debt, if you take out a 30-year mortgage, very little, because it's 30 years out. Okay, sorry to interrupt you, Liz.
Can we go back to how we got the $50 to begin with? Because I understand that it's the 500.
So the solar panel is kicking out 500 kilowatts.
Okay.
And the market price of that from the electric company is 10 cents. So if we have to go buy that, we're going to pay $50 for that amount of power.
But like, how do we know if the 500 kilowatts is that for 1 hour? So we'd only get 1 hour of power per year? We get the number of hours.
Yeah, let me go ahead. Let me just put this up on the screen. We can kind of look. I didn't do this yet.
That's exactly right, what Lizzie said, because that's the predicament I faced. I didn't know whether 500 is for the whole year or if it's for what period of time. So.
Okay.
Like, I understand the math and how that happened. I just don't know that $50 per hour. And then to me, I had to figure out how much sunlight it would typically get, so to figure out how much money we were actually.
Well, we start off with the break even part, right? Let's see. Oops. Okay. Yeah. This really was, this is what you're pointing out. This really wasn't in the problem explicitly.
Yeah.
That it was 500.
Like, I literally Googled generators and how they work. Like, what kilowatt hours I couldn't figure it out.
Okay. Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay. If you put that in. Yeah. So yeah, that would probably be a good edit for the question to have the time period. Without anything being said, I mean, if you saw something like that, it'd probably be okay to, since it all was in annual terms, I think, right?
Yeah, but like when it comes down to like that $50 per hour,
Right.
I'm thinking like that can't possibly be all that we're gonna earn in 1 year if that's per hour. Like there's way more than 1 hour in a year.
Right.
So that's where I just really got lost with the
Okay.
time.
So let's see. So the present value is this. So I think they kept it on the per hour basis though, right? So 468. And then we kind of backdoor into the break even. So maybe it's still relevant. It would have to run for 3,844. So so because you're kind of asking not knowing how many hours, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it's still.
Because if you,
Get it? Okay.
because if you look it up, on average you get about 3 to 4 hours a day of capacity. Some where my head was going, and then it just got far too complicated.
Yeah. If you start kind of assuming that sort of thing into it, you could probably stop it.
Yeah, no.
And so kind of keep the assumptions, keep your assumptions fairly simple. But you raise a good point that make assumptions and kind of go forward. All right, so we'd have to run, so does everybody see this? What we've done is brought all of these back in time. So this is kind of the way my brain works on it. We've got 1.8 million that we know we have to spend today with an uncertain amount of flow coming back. So how do we compare these to present day? We also know, or we think we estimate that 10% is a good number for discounting. And so this 50 bucks is worth this much. This 50 bucks is worth this much. This 50 bucks is worth this much per hour. And so now we bring all of these back, and 45 plus this, plus this, plus this, plus this, plus 1920, plus, right? You guys are seeing that it's the sum of all of these things. That's what they're showing here. So it's a big, long equation, which is easier to do on an Excel spreadsheet sometimes, but that all adds up to $468.25 is the present value of a kilowatt hour use of that time. So now we say, what does that buy me? What does that buy me? And if I'm spending 1.8 million, then I better be getting 3,844 hours. All right, so then what is the second part of the question? Let me pause there. Is everybody okay on A so far?
So when you add up the 45, 19, you go down the line.
Yeah.
What is that? Is that your marginal cost?
Here?
Yeah.
Marginal benefit. So for this problem,
Which would replace marginal cost in the formula for this problem, the break even.
oh, going back to that formula. That formula, I got to be careful, but if I'm thinking of the one you're using the formula, price minus marginal cost, right?
Yeah. So
it's not really relevant here.
All right.
I guess it's the short
I was,
answer to it.
the way I
So
did the problem is I wrote that formula and I was like, I have got to find numbers to plug in.
yeah. So I don't know if it comes close to doing or not, but that formula is specific to identifying how many units do I need to sell to break even on my fixed costs. And so I guess you kind of did this number, but really the number would be 1.8 million. So I got 1.8 million of fixed cost. How many units do I need to sell? Yeah, so with that analysis, you're looking at a slice in time of the same time period. That formula is used to look at something in time period 1, time period 3. Okay. And so what we've done is we've collapsed all this down into time period 0, and now we're looking at the break-even quantity, because this is where you kind of have to somewhat have a leap of faith, but that's why I started off at the $100. I wanted you guys to buy into how the present value formula works, that you put your money in, you earn interest, next year you have $103. You let it ride, the next year you have a little over $106. And that whole concept unravels into this. They are one and the same. But now we're bringing future money back to the present. And if we believe that and our assumptions are with the 10%, then it makes sense to do this analysis in time period 0. And this is the marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis. The cost today is going to be 1.8 million. The benefits are $468 per kilowatt hour, which means if I consume 3,844 hours, then I break even. So we've kind of calculated the quantity that we're doing that way. All right.
I have a question.
Yep.
If you add all the amounts that you have discounted and we're bringing back, so for year 1, year 2, year 3, up to year 20, if you add all those amounts, does the the figure that you get, is it the same as saying 50 times 1.1 to the power 20?
50 times 1.1 to the power of 20. Oh, going
Yes.
the other direction?
Yeah.
If I think you're, yes. If you bring.
So we're trying to find how much $50 will be at 10% discount rate in 20 years.
Yes.
The figure that you get, is that the same as doing it individually year by year and then adding the totals?
You still have to do it year by year because you're going to take this 50 all by its lonesome is going to compound for 20 years. This 50, let me grab year 10, all by its lonesome is going to compound for only 10 years. See what I mean? He's still on mute.
Yes. Sometimes I'm nodding my head because I think I'm in class.
So, yes, yep. So all of these need to be treated individually, and you can go forward in time. So by the way, you would get the exact same answer if we take the 1.8 million times 1.1 raised to the 20th power, which I think is kind of where Keith is going with this. If we compare that answer to bringing all of these 50s forward this way, you're going to get the same answer. So you can go back in time or forward in time. The key to the whole thing is being in the same time period. You can also, you can bring these in, compare them in year 10. Let's bring the 1.8 million forward 10 years. Let's bring all of these forward. Let's bring these backward. And let's do the whole analysis right here. You're going to get the same answer. As long as you keep the time period consistent, that's the key to the time value of money. That's all we're correcting for is the time value of money. Money in different time periods has different value. Let's bring them to one time period and do the analysis. All right. Any other questions on this one? Did we beat this horse enough? Okay, let's talk about C for a second, since I know we didn't get to kind of first base here. How about C? What's going on with C? Maybe there's the question. Let me jump, or there's the answer. Let me jump to the back to the question. 5, 4. There we go. So if it was 2,400 hours, would they break even? The answer was no. So it's not enough hours. Remember, the break-even amount of hours was 3,844. The university is seeking a grant to cover capital costs. How big of a grant would this would make this project worthwhile? So what did we do to make that happen? You saw the answer, but just kind of walk me through it. Let's think about what we did. We know that the 1.8 million doesn't make sense economically now because we don't use enough hours to justify that. It's better off to buy it from the electric company. But there is a number. The point of all this is that there is some number. We already calculated it. There is some number that will work. If we could get the government to come in with some subsidy, how much would it need to be?
We take your efficient hours, 2,400 times the $400, 168.
Okay.
And then subtract that, because that's what, I think that's what we can confirm.
How much we were short? Yeah, that's right.
And
Yep.
so then we're short for $676,000.
Yes, we just value that amount that we're short, essentially. So if we take that amount, this is what would make it worthwhile, because that's what we're actually spending. And that amounts to 1,124,000. So a different way of saying it is, if the solar panel would just cost this, I'd at least break even, then it would be a deal. What's one way to make that happen? Mr. Obama, we're going to try to save the world with solar panels, but we just can't save the world alone. We could use taxpayer dollars, and this project is a go at $676,000. Now, I say that somewhat sarcastically, but that is the reality of environmental type issues and issues where we have externalities is what economists call it. We're going to get into that later. But the private company, let's just assume, doesn't give a rip about the world. They care about themselves and making a profit. The real world says this: if the solar panel ran this, it works for me privately, it's going to be profitable, or at least break even in this case. So the question is, if society benefits at least $676,000, maybe it's more. Maybe we've increased environmental quality by $2 million by doing the solar panels, right? Again, the business owner might not care about that, but maybe there are some real world effects that are going on, and the business owner is not going to get those benefits, but little kids who aren't getting polluted are, or that get to enjoy the environment, or your generations kids, they're going to have a greener, cleaner world. What's that worth to you? If we can sell the taxpayers on that concept, and they value it at least $676,000, we cut a check to this company and say, here you go. Let's do the solar. Let's move to green energy. And the company says, sure. Here was the research we did. That works for us. That's one approach. Now, what do you think happens in the real world? If those were the real world stories, what incentives does this company have in terms of the numbers and what gets presented to Mr. Obama on the proposal? Maybe the numbers speak for themselves. Maybe there's outside research, which of course we want to do. But what would their incentive be? Which number would they like to see fudged a little differently? Yeah, that's right. So there's less money out them. It's a little more security. So they'd like to see that. And so you can see that from this analysis, we might be able to, and by the way, if I change this discount rate to 15%, does 468 get bigger or smaller? Smaller. That's a good one. Mental gymnastics to kind of work through. So if we have $50 divided by 1.1, if it's 50 divided by 1.15, you get a smaller number, right? So all of these are going to end up being smaller. This number is going to be something smaller. Now when we go back and we do all of our analysis, it takes more hours to break even. We go to Mr. President, we say, hey, my opportunity cost is 15%. You know that, I'm a small businessman, and I provide 100 jobs. And I've got lots of things I could be doing with my money. You can see where we go with it, right? So there's lots of these types of issues that the MBA student can be astute to. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to pull that formula out of your head every time without going to a resource and maybe remembering if you need the formula. That's okay. But now you're starting to think like an economist, and you're starting to think creatively on how you can make things better for whatever your objectives are. You know the variables and their impact on it. And you can start to wield a little bit more power in a presentation to work to your advantage, or your company's advantage, whatever the case is. Okay, any other last comments here? All right, any other problems you want to look at?
Can you just, I guess, show or talk, just see the answers for 4-6?
Yep. Betcha. Yeah, that's another thing. If you guys kind of want to just peek at an answer, feel free. Get this thing synced up.
Yeah.
One second. Get this good. Oh, you know what? I have one problem. I don't even have. Scroll and plus. You said 4.6? I'm on screen share. 4.6.
Hmm?
All right, now.
No. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No.
Did you have any further question on there? Does that make sense?
Can I get the answer 4-2 as well?
4-2, sure. Is that it? That's actually it. Split the two things here. So marginal cost is changed due to additional customer. Is this the meat of the answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what your marginal revenue is. Okay, so what?
So then, so yeah, we go on to 7. So we would.
Yeah, so we have 4 riders or more, and that's where it would be profitable. 7 riders.
I think it was number 8. Number 8 is.
Did you have any questions on that one?
11. It's a reset.
I find a lot of these questions like worded really oddly.
The ones in the third.
Like $10 per ride. Like you basically have to assume that $10 per rider. Can you spell?
$10 per rider, that type of stuff.
Yeah, but if you're compensated $10 per ride, like if I'm compensated $10 per ride, I want,
No, she's a scroll up.
if I'm gonna get $10, whether I have 4 people in my car, I have 8 people in my car, or am I getting $10 per rider? Then if I have 2 people in my car, I get $20, which isn't really explained in the actual question.
Yeah.
It's all worded really.
I guess when you run into that, make an assumption, run with it, and move on to the next problem. I know that's tough, but it's stuff that you have to do, you know, sometimes real world too. Although if you want to, they have contact information on, the publishers like to hear that type of stuff and pick that up. So feel free to send that. Did you already do it? Okay, yeah. Send that stuff to them, seriously. And they do make changes. I've talked to this author myself on setting up some of the stuff. And they do want to hear that stuff.
Yeah, because like in the real
Sometimes
world,
it's hard
I
to
would know
catch.
that it's out there $10, $20, but in this question, I'm like.
Right. So for this class, I won't promise I'm going to give you extra credit points, but if I see a nicely, whatever your assumption was laid out, that's all I want to see. You got the answer right. If there's something that's not clear, and you make an assumption and run with it, you're doing good in this class. That's exactly what I want to see you do. Okay, any other problems to review?
I don't know. We go up some.
Yep, which one?
Just go up.
Oh, just to the top
So total.
question. Okay, anything else? All right, shall we move on to tonight's additional fund. All right, so chapter 6, we need to get some basics down on demand. As I mentioned before, the textbook does sometimes assume that you guys have some information at your disposal, which you might have to search for. Luckily, there's plenty of resources. By the way, one I might mention that is very robust with a number of different topics. Have you guys ever gone to Khan Academy?
Yes.
K-A-H-N Academy? So you might want to write that down. He's got a bunch of very simplistic, work you through a problem, and he's been doing this for years now. And so if we're talking about a concept in class, or you read something in our book, and it seems like the author's making an assumption that I know something about something that I'm not sure I really know, and you put law of demand, go to Khan Academy, and they'll give a quick little tutorial of what the law of demand is. So that might be a resource that has, and that's all on YouTube, and he draws graphs with the computer and does a bunch of stuff. So there's a lot of principles of microeconomics is really what most of this is drawing from. Okay, so the law of demand. Does anybody want to take a stab at the law of demand? The law of demand has something to do with price and quantity. Price goes up, quantity goes down, right, for the demand side of life. So in our market system, if we're thinking about the output market, and remember we have two different markets, I guess I'll have my little sheet to pull out. The output market and the resource market. In the output market, we've got consumers that are trying to make themselves as happy as possible, and they will tend to buy more. So as the price of a good or service, G or S, as the price of a good or service increases, the quantity demanded, I want to come back to this here, so write down exactly what I'm writing here. The quantity demanded decreases. All right, so in shorthand notation, an increase in price leads to a decrease in the quantity demanded. So in the real world, this quantity demanded is, I guess, somewhat of a econ term, but this is the quantity sold, if you want to think of it that way. So in the term of a business setting a price, this is the quantity sold. This might be the quantity purchased by an individual consumer. So I want you to think kind of both ways, depending on the context of the question. Sometimes it can throw you. So we think about sales revenue. If we have our business cap on and we're a business, if I increase price, people aren't going to buy as much, right? The quantity sold to consumers. Or we can think about it as the quantity purchased by consumers. But either way, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about what's going to be the demand curve. Now, one important part that I really didn't even see the author put in there, and I think because he kind of saves it for later. So I'm going to give you this one important Latin word to tack on at the end. Ceteris paribus. Do we have any Latin speakers? Anybody know what ceteris paribus means? Holding all. Go ahead, Keith, you got it?
All things held constant.
Oh, nice. Nice, yes. So holding all other things constant. So this relationship holds if we hold all other things constant. Things like what? Well, things like your income might be important, because if all of a sudden you double your income, price might not matter to you anymore, right? Oh, I'll pay the higher price, sure. I got a lot of money. I just won a lottery ticket or something, right? So income, the price of alternatives, which we'll spend a lot of time on in this class. So if I increase the price of Mountain Dew, I'm going to hold constant the price of Mellow Yellow, right? Mellow Yellow and Mountain Dew are substitutes. Some people would say, no way, man, you're not taking my Dew away. It's not even a close substitute. But the price of related goods can be important. So if you're a peanut butter and jelly fan, if you increase the price of peanut butter, and at the same time decrease the price of jelly by the same amount, you're left the same place. If you put equal amounts of peanut butter and equal amounts of jelly on your bread, then you may be indifferent to that, right? So what we're going to do is, when we make this bold assumption that you jack up price, you're going to lose people, it's holding all other things constant. All other things. So this is an economic model. Remember, it's not necessarily going to be reality that there might be other things going along. And by the way, the economist knows that. But we're creating this artificial environment so that we can analyze things. That's one of our assumptions. Just like we make assumptions on some of these problems, that's what we're assuming here. Okay. Questions? Let me pause there for a sec. Got that part? What does this look like? Graphing goggles. Quantity on the horizontal axis. Price on the vertical axis, but also we will a lot of times just write a dollar sign here. We're just measuring dollars. If we're looking at the demand curve, we're specifically honing into price and quantity. And so what does this sucker look like according to the law of demand? Is it a flat line? Is it upward sloping? Is it downward sloping? Downward sloping, right? So this is a negative relationship between two variables. Price goes up, quantity goes down. If price goes down, what happens to quantity? It goes up. So it goes in both directions. So these two variables are negatively correlated with each other, right? So a negative relationship. That negativeness is captured graphically with a downward sloping demand curve. Okay, so if the price of a good, give me a good, any good. First thing that comes to mind. Name it, go. Frosties, okay. Now is this Wendy's Frosties?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other kind? Right? Okay, what do they run? What do they run?
What size do you want?
What do you think?
Well, large is $2.97.
$2.97, got it. So at $2.97, what do you speculate, Lizzie, since you're a fan, what do you speculate, Wendy's in town here, how many of those they sell in a day at $2.97? Huh?
To me or everyone?
To everyone. To all of the Ottawa market. Just, I know we're just guessing, but just having fun. What do you think the Wendy's would sell on a given day at their $2.97 price of these larges?
35.
35. Okay. We're gonna run with Lizzie. I can sense an expert here. So 35. So at a price of $2.97, we have a point on the demand curve. If we actually observe sales of 35, then we have one single point, one data point on the demand curve for that day sales. Now, what could cause it to change? County fairs come to town. Maybe a bunch of people from the outside are coming. Again, that's ceteris paribus. We're changing something, right? But there's an influx of people for the county fair, and maybe there's an increase in demand, which later we'll talk more about this next week. Will be a shift to the right of the demand curve, and that means Wendy's is going to now sell 86. Right? At 297, the demand curve shifted, and now they're going to sell more. But that's a shift. That's not what we're doing here. The law of demand now talks about price. If they lowered their price, presumably they'd sell more. If they raised their price, they'd sell less. The law of demand. Okay, questions there? Okay, let's see, how complicated do we want to get yet? So this chapter really focuses on a different concept called elasticity. Now, before we get there, what is the value of the smoothie? Let me go back to Lizzie. Did you have one today? You did. And what was its value to you? Okay, that's good. Scrumptious. What was it? Yeah, I want you to value it. What was it worth to you? $5 How much enjoyment? I really want you to think about this for a second. What kind of, if you could put a price tag, you remember how you were craving it, right? Before you went, like, I'm going to make a special trip. I'm going to make a special trip over to Wendy's. I want you to value that experience. Give me a value. What was it worth to you? I want you to kind of think, what from the human experience, the scrumptiousness, the coolness on your tongue, what was it worth to you?
Does that go back to like what I would have paid for it?
Yep.
Probably would have paid $5.
Okay, so $5. Let's just roll with that. The point is that value is subjective, right? What it's worth to her is not the price that the company put on it. That just showed her willingness to enter the market at that point, right? Little did they know, Wendy's could have jacked it up on her a little bit. They didn't have their pricing scheme the way they have it run with menu pricing, and it's pretty well known that they have it there. An alternative could be that we just sell Frosties, come on in and make us an offer. Have you ever heard of pricing schemes like that, where they say to make an offer? Yeah, they're actually out there. We don't see it at fast food very often. But walking, garage sale, right? Yeah, make an offer. There's nothing even priced. Well, what's it worth to you? I start low in those circumstances. So that is called consumer surplus in economics, and a very important concept to separate price from value. Value is subjective. Does your value of the Frosties change from day to day? Yep. Sure. It's not always $5. You might be extra craving one. You haven't had one for a month, and maybe you were trying to watch the Frosties for a while, and then you gave up on that. Whatever the case is, that can possibly change. And by the way, you are correct that values for an individual tend to be pretty consistent. So we'll get into behavioral economics. And what we've learned over time is that our behavior as humans is not really erratic. Like, one day I value the Frosty at $35, the next day, 50 cents, right? If your number was $5, it probably tends to be $5. That's why you like going there, because $2.97 is cheap for you, right? So your value, although it's subjective, tends to stay relatively stable, which is good for Wendy's and good for other businesses, that consumers' preferences are relatively stable, because it makes it a lot easier to do business, right? It makes them able to make predictions, because they know that there's a certain amount of Lizzies that are going to come through the door week in and week out. And then there's other people that come through the door week in and week out. And that's where they came up with this $2.97. Because if they priced it at $5, of course, we know now that they would only be selling 20. Right? They would like to be selling more, because that might lead to more profit down the road. But that brings into the other part of the equation that we haven't talked about. If Wendy's is out to make a profit. What is that equation? You know, like pin you down. That's one that should be like, blah, blah, blah. Times quantity, that's one way to characterize it, yeah. I'd probably want to tighten you up a little bit, but anybody else? So she said price minus cost times quantity, which is not technically right, but it's close. Price times quantity is part of it. What is price times quantity? I like to keep this just simple. What's price times quantity? What's that equal to? What's that variable? I sold 35 Frosties at $3.
Revenue.
Revenue. Total revenue, that's half the equation, minus total cost. Now, what Lizzie said was close, but not really correct. You actually missed.
Really what it said in the book.
I know, but the book had, depending on the type of question, should have a little bit more to it. So when the book gave you that, there's probably some other context to it. So here's what you want to think about what type of cost that was, if you write it that way. I also gave you another formula on cost with that big long thing. How do we make an average cost curve? Total cost, go ahead. Divided by quantity, good. So we can rewrite this as price times quantity minus average total cost times quantity, which brings us to Lizzie's expression of it. Price minus average total cost times quantity is the real correct way of saying that. Sometimes we might be able to be loose with it, but there's a big difference between total cost, total fixed cost, total variable cost, average variable cost, average fixed cost. So there's lots of different types of costs. Marginal cost. So this is the expression for the profit equation. So it is good to know both of those because you might use them in different ways, different applications. All right, so this deals with, my point with all that is when we look at the demand curve and we think about pricing, we're only dealing with half the equation. We're only dealing with the revenue side. The objective of the firm is not to maximize revenue, it's there to maximize profit. Big difference. Okay, but this section especially, we are going to focus in on this demand curve and think about its various components. So the next thing we need to look at is the elasticity of demand. So the elasticity of demand, and just to be consistent with the text here, I think they call it the price elasticity. Different books, slightly different, yeah. Price elasticity, yeah. So this is the price elasticity of demand. This is the symbol that I'll use for shorthand, kind of a little signal with a subscript D. So the price elasticity of demand. This is a number that shows the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a price change. A number that shows the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a price change. All right, so I'm just going to round up your 297 here to 3, just to keep things easy. So if we go from $3 to $5, we've had a price increase, and the response was a loss of 15 units. right? So we lost 15 units. You can see how it's kind of an active measure. This is the slope of the demand curve. Rise over run, we're rising $2, we're falling 15. Elasticity is not a slope. It's related to the slope, but it's not a slope. And it is the ratio of the percentage changes. So the formula for this elasticity number is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. So this is my notation with a little triangle. Percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Now, to see, I don't know if I want to use these numbers or not. If somebody increased the price from $3 to $6, what would be the percentage increase in price if it doubles? What would you say is the percentage increase in price from 3 to 6? 50? 100? 100%, right? It's 100. So you take the price is 3, we're going to take 100% of it and mark it up to 6. Now, what if I move the opposite direction and I take $3 off? I have a sale of a $6 price tag and I take $3 off of it. When you go to the store, what are they advertising as the percent off? 50%. Isn't that weird? Then we go from 3% or $3 to $6 was a 100% increase, but from 6 to 3, the same amount of money, was a 50% decrease. So that is why we have a special formula for the elasticity demand. Because when we're talking about the demand curve, I didn't want to use 3 to 5 because it gets, conceptually in your head a little bit different. We want the percentage increase up to be equal to the percentage increase down, and so we take the average of the two. If we go through the whole formula for the percentage change, you might remember it's the new number minus the old number divided by the old number times 100, just shift the decimal place over a couple spots. So it's the new number minus the old number divided by the old number. That's why we get that 100%, 50% with the 3 and the 6 example. So to correct for that, we're going to use the average of the two. By dividing by a 4 each time, notice we get the new number minus the old number. 5 minus 3 is 2. Divided by 4 gives me 2 divided by 4 is 50%. If I go up, the new number, let's see, what was I here? New number minus the old number, 3 minus 5 is a negative 2. Divided by 4, 2 divided by 4, 50%. So we kind of evened it out by using the average number rather than the old number. So it's a slight modification of the traditional percentage change thing that you do. So let's write that out so that we're just clear if this becomes foggy later when you're doing some problems. So if we take the, I'm going to use a little bit different terminology here. Qn for the new, I'll even write out new. The new number, Q new number minus the Q old number divided by the average quantity. All of that divided by the same modification for the price, the new price minus the old price divided by the average price. And that's the way we're going to calculate this number.
What's the Q new minus Q old over what?
Over Q average, the average quantity. So we're going to do that for each one. Now your textbook gives you a short definition. I'm going to skip the detail here, but to calculate the average, 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4, right? That's how we calculate the average. I'll just let you guys do that mentally on your own. But if you put that into this formula and make it even a little bit bigger monster, and then collapse it all down, it gives you the formula that's in your book, which is this. Q1, which is kind of our Q new, if you will. I don't know if I should screw you up or not. I'm going to put the book one in here. Q1 minus Q2 divided by Q1 plus Q2. All of that, and they lay it out all in one line, divided by P1 minus P2 divided by P1 plus P2. If you guys want to do a little mathematical proof, it just all is derived from this formula, but that's the way they give it to you in the textbook. Okay, well, let's do it. Here's our problem. It doesn't matter which one's Q1 or Q2, as long as you're consistent. Remember, in fact, let me just give it to you. Let's say this is P1 and this is P2. This is Q1, which correlates with P1. So this is Q1 is 20, Q2 is 35. Everybody pull out a calculator and start chugging away. First one with the right answer gets an extra credit point tonight. So shout out your answer as soon as you get it. Be brave, as soon as you get an answer. Shout it, shout it, shout it. 160. 160! If you didn't catch on to this, I haven't calculated this ahead of time, so I have no idea if that's the right answer. So we're going to play a little who's the second answer. First one with the correct answer, so it's not over yet, folks. Tell me whatever your answer is. Did you get one, Shanita?
I don't know if it's right.
I know, that's okay.
Negative 1.08 or something.
Negative 1.08, okay. I'm just going to write them down. You guys tell me what you got. See if we can start to have consensus.
Yeah, positive.
Mohammed's got the old watch calculator. Well, I haven't seen that. The whole keyboard. Oh, you got it. Is that like a Google watch or something fancy? Okay.
Man, she's great. I got some.
Yeah.
You got 1.08 again?
Negative
Minus.
1.08.
Okay, so Shanita's are. Is everybody else? Anybody else getting a different answer? Are you getting that?
You're at 0.27.
0.27. Okay, so one thing is I like the negative sign. Why? Why do I like the negative
There's
sign?
more old than new.
What's that?
There's more old than new.
There's more old than new.
Maybe an opposite.
Right, what I was looking for. There's less quantity and
More quantity.
no.
More price, less quantity.
More price, less quantity. And if there was less price, there'd be more quantity. So when we take this Q1 minus Q2 and P1 minus P2, there's always going to be either the upstairs or the downstairs is going to be a negative number. It has to be negative because of the law of demand. Price goes up, quantity goes down, price goes down, quantity goes up. So the elasticity of demand is always negative.
Can I just throw my number out?
Yes.
minus 2.18.
2.18 minus 2.18?
Yeah.
1.08 again, okay.
I got minus 1.32.
Minus 1.32.
But I did it by hand, so.
Okay, if you did it by hand, there could be some rounding or something here. So, I'm gonna take majority rule. You guys can double check this later, but it sounds like we got at least 3 people with negative 1.08. All right, so we're gonna run with that. You guys go back and do your own algebra on your own time. You got the formula. I trust you can do it. So let's take 1.08. If you follow all these, that you'll get that. So the elasticity of demand, how we show that graphically or kind of conceptually think about it, since we use the averages of the 20 in between 20, so here we have 27.5, we say that the elasticity of demand is equal to 1.08 in absolute value. The next slippery topic I'm going to talk to you about. So here's the deal. I'm not sure which economist to write hate mail to for this, but since everybody knows they're always negative, we generally refer to them as positive. And we just say, yeah, the price elasticity demand is 1.08. Because we don't want to say negative every time. Economists are very efficient. So anytime we can get more efficient with our language, we assume everybody knows it's negative, and then we move forward and we say just 1.08. So when you write it, if you want to write it as an absolute value, this is mathematically correct to do. I also do not deduct any points if you calculate that the elasticity of demand is negative 1.08. That's fine to write it that way. So you can write it this way or that way. Those two things are mathematical equivalents. But you can't write this, right? That would be wrong. So either way is fine. But I do seriously want you to know when you see it or we talk about it, often it'll be expressed as positive, but because we got that figured out. Now, if we have a line here and I drop down to $1, what is this number? What's the quantity? Let's call it Q3, I guess, or something. At $1, what's this number? Projected. It'll be exact because assuming this is a line, so no projections needed. 50. So slope of the line is constant. Rise over run, down 2 over 15. Down 2 over 15. So this will be 50. Okay? If we go and calculate the elasticity, what will it be? Let's do it. If you didn't get that negative 1.08, now you got a new set of numbers. Now notice what's going on here. Your P1 or your P2, I don't care what you do here to be consistent, but you got 3 minus 1, you've got 35 minus 50, however you're calculating. And go ahead and calculate that. First person with the correct answer, Shanita got the first one. We'll get another extra credit point. See if we can get you guys comfortable.
Shanita, value has to be recalculated.
Huh?
Why?
No, I was just being silly because
Oh.
I'm convinced that is 2.18.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Should we use that new?
All right, I got my extra credit pen out. I haven't heard any answers yet. Shanita's got +1 column tonight. Can she go for 2?
I got 0.35.
0.35.
Absolute value of that.
Absolute value, 0.35. Got it. Okay, so what do we got? 50 minus 35 is 15, divided by the average of those two is 42.5. All over P1 minus P2, we get a negative 2. Over the average of the two is $1.50. And you got the same thing? Everybody good? All right, so we have a winner, 0.35. Elasticity at this point was 0.35. So did the slope change? No, but the elasticity did, so that's an important takeaway here. So the elasticity changes at every point along the demand curve. The elasticity of demand changes at every point along the demand curve.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
When you wrote the two different equations, what the book said, you said it was Q1 minus Q2 over where you had put Q average, put Q1 plus Q2.
Right.
Are those? I mean,
So if you go through all
this up or
no,
seem like different things?
the twos. So let me talk to you after class.
Okay.
It all breaks down. Yeah. So there's a little proof here that you can get to this. The twos end up canceling for the average.
Oh,
So bear with me now. We'll just go with the formula and we'll talk after class. Okay. So 0.35, is that more responsive or less responsive? The price elasticity of demand is a number. By the way, it's a unitless number, just an extra bonus thing to add in there. There are no units. It's just the ratio of two percentages. So it's not, this isn't in dollars. It's not $0.35. It's not 0.35 umbrellas or Mountain Dews or whatever. It's a unitless number. There's no units to it. A unitless number that shows the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a price change. So my question is this more responsive or less responsive compared to 1.08? Which one shows a bigger responsiveness on the part of the consumer? 0.35? And what's your gut telling you on that? Why is that?
Because at $1, you're gonna sell more.
Okay, you're gonna sell more. Now, let's back up on the story. What I really did is I dropped my price $2 and I increased 15 units. And I did the exact same thing up here. I dropped my price $2 and I increased 15 units. But there's something goofy going on with the percentage changes, right? Because this number ended up being different. So, which one shows a greater responsiveness? Is it 0.35? Is a price change from, let me go up for a moment. Is a price change from $1 to $3, is that a big increase percentage-wise? Yeah, it's huge, right? 300% if we were doing the old-fashioned way, right? $2 would be doubling it. So this is a huge percentage increase. And what was the percentage decrease in sales? Well, it was a big number minus another bigger number divided by the average. So if we're over here with big numbers, let's go down to 100 units, and I go to 85. I'm kind of off the charts here. Is this percentage change a bigger number or a smaller number relative to these? Smaller. It's smaller, right? So as we move along the demand curve, the interesting thing that's going on is that the percentage changes in quantities are getting big, the percentage change in prices are getting small, and vice versa heading this way. So the thing that's kind of odd here is you need to really think about this part of the formula. So yes, we kind of got lost in some math and stuff, but you guys have to have this one memorized too. So this one is just as important. And it also gives you a nice interpretation to give to the CEO of what that 1.08 means, or the 0.35. So if the economist estimated 1.08, so the elasticity of demand equals 1.08, and the boss says, whoa, slow down, talk to me in real language. What does that mean? Oh, well, here's the thing. You can always take any number and divide it by 1. Legitimate? Is that a legitimate mathematical maneuver, remember from 5th grade? Take any number and divide it by 1. Why did I do that? Because now we can tell a nice little story to the CEO. Boss, a 1% increase in price will lead to a 1.08% decrease in quantity. A 1% jump in price is going to cut sales by 1.08%. And so we can always get a nice interpretation of the elasticity by using that. So, interpretation. A 1% increase in price will lead to a 1.08% decrease. There's the law of demand kicking in, right? Increase one, decrease the other. A 1.08% decrease in sales. Let's just use that term. Quantity sold. Sales, I'll put sales or quantity demanded. That's what our formula was doing. But if we have our boss hat on, the boss is just thinking in terms of, well, what am I going to sell? If we raise tuition at Ottawa University, how many students are we going to lose? Right? Law of demand. If you jack tuition by 10%, economists have estimated that you're going to lose 20% students, or whatever. But we go back to that elasticity to remember to look at the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a price change. Woo! Okay, questions on that? Before we go to break, I want to plant a little seed that we'll talk about when we come back. Well, actually, before we do that, then look at this, that hopefully this will kind of help with the responsiveness. If I interpret this number, a 1% increase in price will lead to a 0.35%, less than a 1% decrease in sales, right? So consumers are not as responsive at a 0.35 compared to a 1.08. So we say that demand is more elastic here.
Which one?
The bigger number is more elastic. And I'm gonna lay this all out when we come back from break. But I just wanted to plant that seed to be thinking about the number. And actually, I was gonna do one more thing, but we're gonna take a break instead. Hit that when we come back.
Did you ask your work how much is it?
He said it was $5 a tire.
$5?
Yeah. So it'd be $20. And then he said it'd be $5 for a rotation.
Really?
$5 a tire.
Yeah.
What are you getting tires for?
Not tired, balancing.
I don't know what to say. I need to buy some for my face.
I need to go.
You're like for like a toys or something. Oh. Yeah, I asked. Maybe. I mean, do you know what they're? Yeah. They open it to see if I get there early.
What's that? Oh. Did you guys all get into the Blackboard site?
Yes.
I posted some homework in the wrong place, but I also posted it in the right place.
That's fine. Yeah, that's why I put it so that it's
Yeah.
under the postings for that
Okay.
reason. So that
I realized.
you can't undo it once it's
Yeah.
there, but so. Okay, so good. All right, any questions on the Blackboard stuff? There's Kate. Okay, everybody get this down as much as they want to get down. I'm gonna erase it all. Okay, so the elasticity of demand changes along the linear demand curve, and somewhere along there it equals 1. Now, just by coincidence, we had 1.08, but somewhere along there it's 1, which we were pretty close to that. What does elasticity of 1 mean? There's still a change going on. But kind of run through that interpretation that we just had.
Is it a slope of what?
No, it's not slope.
Well, it's for every.
Because the slope is constant, but the elasticity changes. And so what I'm saying is that somewhere along here, the elasticity is 1. So read off that definition. I'm sorry, not definition, interpretation.
It would mean a 1% increase in price, a 1% increase in quantity.
Right, the 1-to-1, right? So just this 1-to-1 thing. So anyway, that's got kind of an anchoring spot for us. And that anchoring spot has a special place graphically that I want to show you now. So watch this. If you take the midpoint between a linear demand curve and where it intersects the horizontal axis, if you take the midpoint and come straight up, that is where the elasticity of demand is unitary. So we say it's unitary elastic. And it's just not too big of a deal. It's just a 1-to-1. Change price by 1%, quantity decreases by 1%, or if it was an increase. Everywhere to the left, the elasticity of demand is less than 1, but greater than 0. So we saw one example of that. We were at 0.35. And this is known as the inelastic range of the demand curve. So over this whole area, from kind of here to here, all of those elasticities are between 0. As we get really close to the horizontal axis, it approaches 0. And up here, it gets close to 1. And then, guess what the numbers are up here? Good, more than 1. And we say that demand is elastic. This is the elastic range of the demand curve. Now, just so you have a placeholder, I'm going to tie in a graph here down below. So do that. But before we get there, I want to show you one other step with the formulas.
What is the word next to what's equal to 1?
Unitary. Unitary elastic. So from the formula, if the elasticity of demand is greater than 1, it's elastic. Note that that implies that the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price. I'll rewrite the formula here just so that you guys probably have it in your paper, not too far away. But percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. All it's saying is that if this number happens to be bigger than 1, The numerator is bigger than the denominator. That's all we're saying. If it's equal to 1, then these two are equal. And of course, if it's less than 1, then that implies that this one is less than this one. Keep things nice and brief, right? So this all kind of ties together. Formula or equation goggles, graphing goggles. That's kind of the connection here. All right. So where we start to use it, especially in managerial economics class, is its relationship to the cash register in terms of total revenue. Total revenue. That was our half of the profit equation that we were concerned about. And the total revenue function looks like this. I just want you to take my word on it for now, and then we'll describe it. If you take this little dashed line and come down, and then draw king of the hill here, that looks like this. And this comes into here, and this is at the origin. That is the total revenue function. Just price times quantity. I use the word function, but it's not too sophisticated. Right? Price times quantity. What's significant about that? What's that telling you? And now if we start to look at the two up above, notice that this is the inelastic range. This half is showing what's going on with the elastic range.
That controversy should price it
Here, that price will maximize revenue. Yes. Is that where you should be? Yeah.
Going to maximize.
Oh, no.
Oh, good. You caught yourself. What are we trying to maximize?
Profit.
Profit. This is only one half of the equation. So we're not out to revenue maximize. We're out to profit maximize. We'll get to that other part of the equation later. We've talked about it a little bit, though. I guess I might as well. What was the shape of the marginal cost curve? What did that thing look like? Yeah, Mohammed gave me the Nike sploosh, right? So as I start to produce more units, what happens to my cost per unit at the margin? Each additional unit goes up, is what this marginal cost curve says. So yes, we might be growing revenue, but if my costs are escalating at a quicker rate, it might not be a good thing to do. So we want to maximize profits. It's the interrelationship between those two. All right, I didn't want to get distracted too much, but it's always good to kind of pull that back in because you really want to keep these concepts separate for now. So, Clay pointed out revenues are maximized here. Good. What else? Can you tell me about what this picture is saying? Will, what is, when companies want to spur business, what's kind of their knee-jerk reaction that they tend to do when they want to sell? Discount, lower the price, right? It's always about price, right? That's kind of the knee-jerk reaction that I like to question people on to make sure they're carefully thinking about that. And this example tells us an interesting thing, is that if we lower price here, and I move from point A to point B, if I lower price and I move from point A to point B, I am snaking along the demand curve, right? Those 2 points correspond directly on the revenue function with A prime and B prime. And that's why this graph, this is one of my favorite graphs, by the way. This one's kind of fun to me. A prime and B prime. A decrease in price leads to a what in revenue? An increase, right? Just look at the graph, we're going up the revenue hill. A decrease in price leads to an increase in revenue. That's people's knee-jerk reaction. Now, if we're over here though, here's the one that's a little more counterintuitive for people. Moving from point C to point D. And I do the exact same $2 price increase or decrease, by the way. So, right, the way we did that before, we do the same $2 price decrease. That corresponds on the revenue function with C prime and D prime. And a decrease in price led to a decrease in revenue. Total revenue goes down. You know, you gotta be scratching your head and saying, well, why? I don't get it. You decrease price here, revenues climb, that's what we wanted. We decrease price here, revenues fall. Why?
Because at that point, people don't want it or something.
Okay, you're kind of close.
Because there's so much of it that people don't value it as much. And
Okay.
then, like if you have too low price on it, they're like, oh, it's probably not even good quality.
Okay.
They're still fine.
Do your costs end up outweighing?
We don't have any costs, so I don't want to go there. We don't have any costs. We're just purely looking at cash register receipts.
And the discount's the same from A to D.
Yeah, let's just assume it's a $2 drop here and a $2 drop here.
Yeah. It's not a significant elastic at that.
All right, good. I thought you were going to do that on your first answer, but you didn't come to that. It depends on the elasticity of demand. So what we know from the law of demand is that a decrease in price leads to an increase in quantity. But from the revenue picture, this one going down is bad. This one going up, good. So we've got these two countering things. Erica, a little minus point.
Fun. I'm trying to take a picture of it once you'll.
Perfect, no problem. I just wanted to make sure we're clean. So price goes up, quantity goes down. Price goes down, quantity goes up. So we got these countering things, right? In terms of the revenue function, we want revenues to go up, but it depends on the elasticity of demand. Because if you're doing let's stick with a price decrease. A price decrease is bad. But if the quantity effect is huge, then that's good still. That's capturing the elastic portion of the demand curve. The quantity effect overwhelms the price effect. So if I think over here with this equation, I like to kind of think in terms of these arrows. We do a price decrease, but if that price decrease is a little arrow, and the quantity effect is a big arrow, the big arrow overwhelms the small arrow, we're golden. Revenues climb. But if the price arrow is relatively big and the quantity effect is small, the big arrow overwhelms the small arrow and revenues fall. And that's exactly what we're seeing here with that relationship. All due to the elasticity of demand. And so some business owners make that mistake thinking, well, how do I stir up business? Funny thing is, the answer might be to do what? To actually increase revenue. Increase your price. If the demand is inelastic for your product, the answer is actually to increase your price, not decrease it. That's kind of bizarre, right? But you can kind of think of things that are inelastic, people really want, right? You can kind of charge whatever price you want. Well, if you can have a small quantity effect by jacking up your price, raise your prices 50%. Oh, I'll lose some customers. The law of demand tells me that. But if I only lose 2% customers, that was a good move. And then to add on to this, if you raise your price, you lose quantity, what happens to your costs? It actually goes down, so that we got this moving in the right direction now. You are absolutely golden in terms of profit maximization if you face an inelastic demand. Good luck getting that, by the way. That's not an easy position to get at, right? But if you're the inventor of a new product and you're the only show in town, you probably face a relatively inelastic demand until competition kicks in and then we start getting into substitutes and all that kind of stuff, which is where we're kind of headed next. All right, last comments on that.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you're taking into account the entire graph that you show here for total revenue, would you say that on the second half, after unit elasticity, would you say revenue is going down, or that it's increasing at a slower rate than it was in the first half?
The rate of change. The rate of change depends on the steepness or flatness of the demand curve, which is kind of where I'm going to be heading next. So it is curved, as we got it shown here. The main thing is that a price decrease causes a decrease in revenue. That's the part that you got to hang your hat on. Is just what we said there.
Okay.
All right, so let's go to the extremes. You know, we've got all these extreme sports nowadays that are kind of mainstream now, but now we're going to talk about some extreme econ with elasticities. Yeah.
Can you explain one more time why? I mean, how does it benefit to increase the price when the demand is inelastic?
So if the demand is inelastic, and we reverse what we're doing here, we had a price of $8, and we're going to raise the price to 10, right? So an increase in price is good for revenue, but we're going to lose customers. But the amount of customers we lose is relatively small. And so an increase in price in the inelastic range causes revenues to fall or to climb as well. That's just kind of the mechanics of the graph. So what I like to tell students is to kind of have this picture memorized, because there's a whole bunch of multiple choice and short answer problems that are embodied in it. So for instance, one would be worded kind of like what we've been doing. If demand is inelastic and there's an increase in price, what happens to revenue? If you observe revenues falling when you had a price decrease, what was the elasticity? Elastic. You see what I mean? You can kind of ask all kinds of questions around this concept of elasticity. This picture captures all the answers to that. Okay? All right, so extreme elasticities. Boom. Demand curve, perfectly vertical. Boom. Demand curve, perfectly flat. Okay, this is perfectly elastic. So perfectly elastic is that picture. We say that demand is perfectly elastic. And this one is perfectly inelastic. So if we think about the Mona Lisa, the quantity is 1. There's 1 Mona Lisa, right? I'm sorry, that was a bad example. Actually, the supply of Mona Lisas would look like this. The demand might not look like that. We might have different demands, but there is only 1. Oops, I still want to keep the demand. I'm just trying to explain the elasticity. All right, so let's work through the formula really quick. Elasticity of demand is percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. On this weird demand curve, if we pick 2 points on it, we've got some number here for quantity, but P1 equals P2 here, right? Price is the same, quantity changes. So we get some number, the percentage change in quantity, new number minus old number divided by the average. We get some number divided by 0. No change. 0. Some number divided by 0 equals 0. some number, anything divided by 0. Is that right? It's indivisible. Remember that 5th grade math teacher? I had Mrs. Von Berg, that we kind of called Mrs. Von Bag, but we weren't very nice back then. She said, remember this rule? You can't divide by 0. You can't divide by 0. That was the rule of math. So, now that we are in graduate school, though, we can outwit Mrs. Von Berg and divide by something really close to 0, like 1 over 1 million. If I take some number divided by a really small number, like 1 over 1 million, does this end up being a big number or a small number? Some of you are like, oh, wait a second, Russ, that's not close enough to 0. I want you to get as close to 0 until you're comfortable. So if that's 1 over 1 zillion, or 1, I don't know what those big numbers are, gargantuan something zillion, you get as close to 0 as you want. What happens to this number, this expression? As this gets really small, what happens to it? Keith gave me the sign language. It gets really big. What do you do with a fraction in the denominator to solve this little, a number divided by a fraction?
Invert.
Invert, thank you, Keith. Invert the denominator, multiply it times the numerator, right? So it's some number times a million. If you want to put a zillion here, it's some number times a zillion. It is infinity. It blows up and gets as big as you want it to be. You can't divide by 0, but you can divide by something close to 0. So this is infinitely elastic. So perfectly elastic demand curve has an elasticity of infinity. It's infinitely elastic. Now, this one I saved for the 0 people. Price, some number, quantity, 0, elasticity of demand, percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. Percentage change in quantity is a big fat 0, some number. 0 divided by some number is, now I got y'all scared.
0.
0, yes. You can divide anything by 0, that's not a problem. So this perfectly inelastic demand curve has an elasticity of 0. Now that's kind of what was going on with this graph. As we move towards the vertical intercept, this number is getting really close to infinity. Like the closer you snug up to the vertical axis, it blows up to infinity. The closer you snug down to the horizontal axis, it equals 0. You never get there, but you get close to it, right? And so that represents your endpoints on a linear demand curve, downward sloping linear demand curve. Here's your 2 extreme cases. And we will use both of these extreme cases. So it's just something to think about. We'll get to this one next week, especially the perfectly elastic demand curve. All right, now, the real world's often in between. So let's talk about the tweeners. The tweeners. I don't think I've ever used that word tweeners teaching this class. This is a new one for you guys, the tweeners. Here's what I mean by the tweeners. What about one that's kind of steep or kind of flat? Kind of steep or kind of flat? Let's talk about this one first. Is the kind of steep one, would you call that relatively inelastic or relatively elastic?
Relatively
Inelastic, good. Here's the one little secret thing to remember. The more and more steeper it gets, the more it starts to look like an eye, or inelastic. All right? So these are relatively inelastic curves, and this is relatively elastic. Just kind of the terminology that we'll see with these. Another way to think about it, since we have this distinction, is that if I went to some obnoxious prices that don't make any sense for Mountain Dew, like what if a Mountain Dew was $166,000? What would, well, the demand curve still continues up there. Where the midpoint is here. You go up. There's the unitary elastic point, the elastic range, the inelastic range. So what we're visibly seeing is really all numbers that fall in the inelastic range. So we kind of just refer to it as being relatively inelastic. Okay. Anything else there? Well, all of that was price elasticity.
Hooray.
And now we have income elasticities and cross-price elasticities. We can have an elasticity for actually anything. So what we're trying to measure is the responsiveness of the consumers to a change in something. Price elasticity is a change in price. But now we can go back and apply the same logic to income and prices of related goods. So, as a segue into that, let's think about the things that impact the elasticity of demand. So before we get there, things that influence the price elasticity, which we've been doing, the price elasticity of demand. So one way to think about this is the flatness or steepness of the curve, i.e. the flatness, you want to think about it, this is kind of layman's terms here, the flatness or steepness of demand. So what I'm thinking about is what causes a demand curve to look like an eye, or what causes it to more look like a flat pancake over here? What are the factors that influence the price elasticity of demand? Gasoline, relatively inelastic or elastic? Gasoline, to your personal life. Are you responsive to price changes? Or when price changes, you pretty much buy what you used to buy?
Still gotta buy it.
Yeah, still gonna buy it, right? Now, if price jumps from $3.29 a gallon to $6 a gallon, are you going to respond a little more? What are you going to start to do? Tell me about what would go. Let's face it, it could happen.
Drive less.
Drive less by doing what? Bike, right? Find alternatives. What else? So biking.
Horse.
What's that?
Horse.
Horse. Okay. We're gonna go way back to horse and buggy. Okay. Carpooling, right? All of a sudden you're like, hey, maybe we could ride together, which you wouldn't do because you're okay paying $3.29 a gallon. Jumps up to $6, you start carpooling, right? A lot of people think that Americans have gas prices too low, and so some people fall in the camp of, well, let's tax the heck out of gas because then people will start using less of it, better for the environment, blah, blah, blah. So otherwise, in reality, many governments around the world will tax gasoline because they know it's fairly inelastic and they're not going to lose tax revenues by taxing it. Same thing with booze and cigarettes, all those things that tend to have a little more inelastic demand. They're better things to tax. All right, so things that influence the demand, one of the main things I want you to put down is the availability, because we'll come back to this topic in later chapters, the availability of substitutes. The availability of substitutes. I'm not even going to write it down, but there's a couple other things like the fraction of your income that it makes up. So if bubblegum prices go up from $1 to $1.20, that's a 20% increase. You're like, I don't care. But if a car goes up 20%, you're like, I'm not buying that car, right? Because it represents a larger fraction of your income. So little tiny items, we can get away with a little more latitude. They tend to be more inelastic if it represents a smaller fraction of your income. So I'm not going to write that one down because I want you to really remember this one for future items we're going to come into. The availability of substitutes. So more subs means more elastic or inelastic? More now write this down and then think, because this is what you kind of need to buy into. That's why I wanted to emphasize it tonight.
More elastic.
More elastic, that's correct. So if there's a whole bunch of substitutes and somebody jacks up their price, if McDonald's doubles their price for their shake,
McFlurry.
Shamrock shake McFlurry, if they double their price, what do? Run to Wendy's, run right across the street. Called availability substitutes, which means McDonald's doesn't have a lot of pricing power. If they raise their price even 30 cents, they're going to lose a whole bunch of customers. They're all going to run across the street to Wendy's, right? So there's a big response. It's relatively elastic. So more substitutes means more elastic. A bigger response. And again, in layman's terms here, a flatter demand curve, graphically. You visually be looking at the flat line. Okay. So let's see here. Got one more thing to nail you with here on this before we leave this chapter. I'm just going to write them down quickly, those other elasticities. So we got the income elasticity, which is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by a percentage change in income. This is all in your book. Kind of write this down, just so I think conceptually when you review your notes, you'll see the connection again. So this is the income elasticity. Then there's also something called the cross price elasticity, and I think, yeah, that's what your book uses, terminology. Cross price elasticity. Percentage change in the quantity of Coke. I'm just going to start you off with an example. The sales of Coke is also dependent upon the percentage change in the price of Pepsi. A price of a related good. So now we can test the sensitivity of, well, what if Pepsi raises the prices? What happens to us? Cross price. So let's work through that little mental gymnastics here to try to predict the sign of the cross price elasticity for substitute goods. If the price of Pepsi goes up, the quantity of Coke goes up. Pepsi's more expensive, people go buy Coke, right? Pepsi drops their prices, quantity sales of Coke goes down. So if we calculate these numbers, similar to what we did with the price elasticity, substitutes are going to have a positive sign or negative sign when you crank out the numbers. Positive, same direction as those price changes, right? So with Coke and Pepsi, I'll put one little extra note here because again, this is something we'll look at later. A cross price elasticity, let me just write that a little bit. For substitutes, like Coke and Pepsi, the cross price elasticity of demand is greater than 0. The number is a positive number. And sign matters. For complements, peanut butter and jelly, like PB and jelly, price of peanut butter goes up, jelly demand goes, quantity demanded goes down. So peanut butter and jelly sandwich is more expensive now, so I'm going to buy less jelly too. I'm also going to buy less peanut butter, by the way, but I'm going to buy less peanut butter by the law of demand. Peanut butter prices go up, I buy less peanut butter, but now I'm also going to buy less jelly because I want it for my sandwich. Those two goods are complementary goods, they're complements. So for complements like PB&J, the cross price elasticity would be less than 0, negative. So for this elasticity, unlike the negative sign that we got with the price elasticity, sign matters. A positive sign means the two goods are substitutes. A negative sign means the two goods are complements. Sometimes we don't know necessarily what they are. Like we talk about peanut butter and jelly, it's like, oh yeah, of course they go together. So maybe it's beer and wine. Substitutes or complements? Substitutes, right? Everybody substitutes a wine for a beer. Do they? You know, I don't know. If you're going to throw a party and you're having a bunch of people come over, what might you want on hand for your party?
Depends what kind of people are coming out.
True.
We buy beer and wine.
Beer and wine for your party, right? So that you can cater to different people, different tastes. So in that way, for a party, beer and wine are complements with each other. We tend to buy them together. If we're a boozer, we buy all kinds of booze. So maybe they're complements, right? So that's the type of thing that economists investigate, is to see what those two things are. And more importantly, you know, it goes beyond the sign. Sometimes we want to look at the sign, but we're really interested in that number. If Pepsi jacks up their prices 10%, how much is that going to help us or hurt us? Well, again, we can interpret the number the same way. If the cross price elasticity is a 5, a 1% increase in the price of Pepsi will lead to a 5% increase in Coke sales. Right? So all of a sudden we put meat on the bones on quantifying what the number means and how it's going to impact our company. Okay. I got one last one. That's an application of elasticities, just so that we had it on the board. We talked about break even last time, and an economist I don't know who to give credit for unless it's in the book right here, came up with a stay-even analysis. This is kind of interesting. Stay-even analysis. It's kind of similar to the break-even analysis, except now what we're thinking about is how many units am I going to change by to stay even if there's a price increase. So if I rack up my prices or change my prices, what quantity do I need to stay even in terms of revenue? So just like what we were doing before. And so it's a nice little application here, but thinking about the quantity that I need to stay even by looking at the percentage change in price divided by the percentage change in price plus this little factor. And there's a bunch of math that goes behind this, but the intuition is kind of nice, just using the formula. And that's what it looks like. It's kind of ugly. write that down and then we'll talk about it. So we got the percentage change in price divided by this weird factor, percentage change in price plus this little creature. This little creature we saw. I didn't want to pick on Brandon just from what you said earlier today. What is price minus marginal cost? That had a name. Price and marginal cost, the difference between the two. So if a unit costs me $5 and the price is 8, 8 minus 5 is $3.
Is that what was called a contribution factor earlier?
Good, good. The contribution margin. That's right. So good, Keith. So this is the contribution margin, which we talked about before in a different context, which was with the break-even analysis. Now we're using it, tying it into our elasticities. Okay. The thing that's nice about this is we don't actually have the elasticity in it. So this comes about from the elasticity, but look at what we've got here if you're a boss of this company. Do you know what price you're currently selling Pepsi at? Yes. Right? Do you know what your cost is? Yes. If you're proposing a 10% increase, you plug it into this formula and you can determine the quantity that you need to stay even. Now we might think, well, we're going to get a lot more. Again, it's kind of one of those decisions of, this is what I need to stay even. Does this number feel right to me that I should do it? If I'm looking at a price increase, how many customers am I going to lose? Or if I'm looking at a price decrease, how many customers am I going to gain? And is that going to be enough to offset? So we kind of think about volumes, and it gives us a number with the quantities. And again, we know our current quantity, and so we can kind of work from that information. All right. That is chapter 6. So chapter 7, we just have, it's literally 4 pages long. So not too terrible. I'm going to hit it with some PowerPoints since we've been lecturing at the board the whole time so far. Let's see here. Open it up. Oh, I don't know if any of you looked, but the PowerPoints are on the Blackboard shell. They will populate after we're done with class. And so they're up there now for the ones that we've gone through. And after tonight's class, they'll populate.
I have a question.
Sure.
So for the stay even analysis,
yes,
will we just need to know the formula and be able to plug in the numbers, or we need to understand how it comes about or any of that?
In the text, no. Knowing the formula and knowing how to plug it out, yes. And then also just I think this will help you work through it, kind of the concept of it, that we're able to think about the quantity effect for a given price change and how much we need to stay even. So yeah, if you've got those 2 parts, that's what I'm looking for. All right, so let's see here, screen share. Okay, so that looks okay. Boy, it's a good thing I got equalized. Oh, all right, good deal. Here we go. Fun again. Okay, we talked about this last time, that costs were increasing. And that is a little bit of a slippery topic of, well, why would costs go up? So like if you are making hamburgers and burger can be purchased at $3.50 a pound, If I go buy 10 pounds, it's $3.50 a pound. Well, what's the cost of another bag of burger? $3.50 a pound. $3.50 a pound. $3.50 a pound. $3.50 a pound. You start to kind of wonder, like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Like, it seems like we can always buy more. And if anything, Sam's Club gives us a discount for buying more burger. So what's going on with those costs versus what seems to be in our gut? And the answer lies in the production process. And this is something that is a top principle of economics, the law of diminishing marginal returns or the law of diminishing marginal product. I want to give you one quick snapshot to burn into your memory to kind of hang on to this, because it's important in terms of that physical production process. So I used to be a cook, and I might need a prop for this. So back in the day, I could slay a pretty mean burger, and I worked at a little greasy spoon restaurant, and this was, actually, Keith, I need to take you off. Stop share. There's going to be lots of acting in this. You got to see this. All right. So this is my grill top, right? I'm the worker, I'm the laborer, and I make hamburgers. And so if I come to work, I found that my productivity is about 100 hamburgers. So working by myself, I can put together 100 hamburgers. All right. So this is my grill top. This is where I do all the flipping. If I add another person on, another cook onto the shift, what will happen to the quantity of burgers? Will it go up to 200? It'll stay at 100 with 2 people? And more hamburger, of course, you got more variable products. So we do actually buy the $350 pound burger. I add a person. Can we make more with 2 people?
Well,
I mean,
you can.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
Collectively, you get more, but each of you would have to make.
Okay, so good. So we got the idea. We should see production go up if I'm adding resources to it, right? So my question is, I can do 100 by myself. Let's say that we're identical people. Somehow we got the genetics thing figured out and we cloned a Russ. And so now we've got 2 Russes coming in. Will the 2 Russes make 200 burgers, less than 200, or more than 200? Less? Yeah. Is it possible that they could do more? Can you imagine any circumstances where maybe the number goes up to 210, which would mean, of course, that the extra person added, the 2 of them working together could do 210 instead of something less than 200. How? Working together, and what else? What kind of stuff goes on with working together? Just expand on that, or anybody.
Separating your,
Assembly line separation task. Adam Smith, specialization of labor. Now he comes in, I patty up the burgers while he's tending to the buns and flipping the burgers, right? So through specialization, we might be able to actually increase productivity, meaning that the marginal productivity for me was 100 hamburgers. The marginal productivity for my second Russ, by the way, identical in skill and everything that comes in, the marginal product of that worker was 110 burgers. Our total product as working together is 210. Got the difference here? Marginal product versus our total product. By the way, don't stop there. What's my average product? Because I have 2 workers, if I'm making 210 hamburgers, what's the average productivity of labor? 105. See the differences there? Big distinction. Remember we had the first lesson on all of this first week or last week. Don't confuse average and marginal. Huge mistake. Average and marginal are 2 different things. Now, Russ number 3. Do we have this increasing thing going on again? Could. Russ number 4.
You're gonna get to a point.
there's going to be a point where.
Russ number 5. Russ number 6. Russ number 7. Russ number 8. Russ number 9. Where are we at now here? How much is the extra burgers is that extra 8th Russ bringing on, able to add? Very small, maybe still positive though. Maybe we can squeeze out 8 more burgers. But once we've reached the virtually production capacity of this grill top, the key to this whole exercise is that, yes, we could change burgers, yes, we could change buns, yes, we could change lettuce, yes, we could change Russes, but we couldn't change the size of the grill top capital. So the amount of capital, at least one resource was fixed. And so as you add more and more of a variable resource to at least one fixed resource, the amount of product from each additional unit of labor eventually falls. The extra russes that come in have to have diminishing, oops, no longer up here, diminishing marginal product. The law of diminishing marginal product, it has to hold. There's not a production process out there that won't hold, as long as you're keeping one thing fixed. Okay, so that's a huge thing, because now when it comes back to pay, what am I paying each Russ? Same, yeah, the 725. I can hire as many Russes as I want. So the 8th Russ costs me the same as the first Russ, right? So what's happening to the cost per burger when the 8th Russ is diminishing marginal product, but the cost of each additional Russ is staying at 7 1/4? The cost ends up going up. Every additional hamburger, as we graph it out, will go up. The law of increasing cost, that J-shaped swoosh, the law of increasing cost comes about from the law of diminishing returns. And that's sometimes the counterintuitive thing that we see happening when we look at cost in isolation. We don't think about the increasing cost, but when we think about the entire production process, it makes sense if we phrase it that way. Okay, so that is law of diminishing marginal product, important law. All right, still sharing, here we go. Okay, so here they add a couple comments on why we might see that. Monitoring, so I didn't get into it on this particular illustration, but the Russes start talking to each other. Hey, what are you doing this weekend? Are you going over to this party? No. You know, so there might be lack of productivity, what economists call shirking, like slacking off. That's the econ term is shirking. So we might have that type of thing going on, and all of that leads to that J-shaped marginal cost. All right. There's the picture we did last time, how that affects the average. Remember, the marginal cost curve intersects the average at the minimum point. By definition, it has to. That's when the GPA, our semester GPA is the same as our overall average, it stays the same. Okay, so learning curves. Look at what's going on here. Airplane manufacturing costs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 planes, marginal cost. Going up or down? Down. Total costs. They're going up. Average cost. Going down. When the marginal cost is below the average is falling. What we are is on that front end of the J shape. And that's where we can have huge productivity increases. Kind of like by adding the second Russ, right? Like, oh, we've got good things going on. There's a learning curve. If I bring new people on, it takes them a while. And once they get working together, once we've learned how to make the first plane, then the second, third, and fourth become easier. There's kind of a learning curve to the process. So that would reflect itself in the numbers that way, in terms of the graph. Over this quantity, when you're talking airplanes, if we kept going again, kind of like we did on the other thing, to 20 planes, 100 planes, somewhere out here, that marginal cost curve turns up. Because the law of diminishing marginal product is going to kick in. But in the airplane industry, it's always at this little short side, because the demand in the market isn't that big yet. There's not a big enough market to make 100 planes. There's only 10 going up of production line. costs. So we kind of stay in this range as the relevant part. All right, here's a little example. So Gibson guitar. Do we have any guitar players? Musicians play some guitar? Okay. So, what's the fingerboard play? What part of the guitar is that? Fingerboard. The neck, yeah, the part that you see people, and then they're running their fingers, right? So rosewood and ebony is used for these high-end guitars, but we had some issues with the ebony. So some ebony has these brown streaks. All right, it's still better than the rosewood from a. This goes beyond looks, aesthetics, but it actually plays better, sounds better with the ebony. So they tend to use the streaked ebony on these lower end guitars because the look. So the performance is still the same, but it doesn't look quite as cool if it's got the streaks in it. All right, so if we start looking at the cost of our guitar business, and we think about the cost of acquiring ebony, and maybe ebony comes in, we can buy it in its pure form, or we just have to buy it in aggregate. Some's going to be streaked, some's going to be white, right? And so our pure white. So what does the cost, if we have to buy it in bulk, what is the cost of the streaked ebony? If we're in the business of making guitars that are pure, what is really the cost of the streaked ebony, the marginal cost?
Should be lower.
Should be lower, right? So, in fact, if we have to buy the product in bulk, and we usually are, I'm kind of telling a weaving a little story here, but when we started making guitars, we always had pure ebony on there. I said ivory. So when we had the ebony, we always used the pure because it looked the best. And we'd always buy it, and then we'd have this extra ebony. So now when I have it, the marginal cost of the ebony is 0, other than maybe some handling costs, or it's very low if we weren't using it. So then the guitar maker says, well, this is going to work the same. Maybe we should just make a middle guitar, make something else out of it. Now you go through and do that. That was the logic of the economic decision at the time, right? The cost of this extra product was really 0 because you had to get the ebony shipped in that way. Light bulb goes off, let's produce these guitars. But now when we go backwards and we look at the accounting and we're a year into it, and we say, well, what's the cost of this guitar? Well, the cost has maybe changed because we've changed our production process. And now we buy a block of ebony and we attribute, well, 40% of this block was the streak stuff and part of it was the pure stuff. And so now we start allocating costs a little bit differently. So the accounting method for calculating the cost can be different than the economic way. And so the point of that is that economists operate on the margin. We're always on the edge of life. We're the fun ones. We're not the bean counters that are doing it after the fact. We are on the front lines, right? So that's why marginal costs are so important. You've got to learn how to frame the question right, or the issue, and how to move forward, and not get lost in some of maybe the actual dollars spent. What's more important is, what do we got? How do we move forward, right? So the marginal costs, marginal benefits, even if the accountant calculates it differently after you're done. Okay, so what we're looking at here is called economies of scope. So another illustration before we get into the definition. Suppose all family company makes, sells, distributes popular breakfast sausage. Can this firm realize economies of scope? So what scope economies are is providing multiple products. And by doing so, you have a lower cost. So we have companies that offer a variety of products, right? Manufacturing places, they do a variety of offerings. Why? Why do you have multi-product firms instead of them just producing one? So we just did the guitar example, so we can kind of play with that if we want.
You're not gonna satisfy all the consumers. So if you have more, you're gonna try to reach a bigger.
Put a different value on the
Yeah.
product.
Okay? So playing off, I agree with what you guys are saying. Playing off this guitar example, they could provide, when they started their business, they provided just the guitars with the pure ebony, right? How have they lowered costs by producing now 2 guitars?
Well, they don't have to pay for another building, you don't have to pay for
Good.
the employee, you get that
There's a-
theoretically the buyer.
Okay, so we've got a lot of that overhead operating cost that might work, coupled with the fact that we might have a production process that further shares those things. So we're not in the guitar and amp business, right? But I'm just trying to think of something that was way off of a guitar. But maybe the violin and a guitar, even though I know those things are pretty far off. But maybe the producers of it, some of the materials, the raw materials are similar. See what I mean? So the closer we are in the product offerings, the more we might have what economists call economies of scope. So from a formula standpoint, is this. The mid-range guitar, the high-end guitar. Producing those jointly is less expensive than producing the high-end and producing the low-end at different facilities, right? That's economies of scope. All right. All right, can you guys think of any other types of scope economies? Here at Ottawa, since a lot of you work here. There's kind of different examples. It doesn't, we got this guitar business in our head, but just think of where we're offering multiple things.
So like for housing that we offer, like single room apartments.
Okay, good.
The same staff.
Yeah. Yeah, we might have multiple staff to offer different types of rooms. Good. There's kind of lots of examples once you start thinking about it.
All different majors.
Different majors, right? So we're a school, well, we've got a business major, maybe we should do accounting. Well, okay, we need to hire an accounting professor, which is an additional cost, but we still have the program together and we got everything else. So yeah, we could have multiple offerings. Okay, different sports, yeah. So wrestling we just added, right?
Yeah.
We had to go out and build this wrestling room that's really nice. You guys, most of you have seen it, Mohammed, you might not have. Okay, so we got a really nice thing that is started up, but they're gonna hold their events in the Wilson Athletic building where we do basketball and volleyball. And so there's a multi-use building to add on to run a separate program of volleyball and basketball would cost separately. If you needed an arena, you needed all that, but to offer them jointly, much less. The total cost of providing. All right, good. So that's economies of scope. Yeah, let's do this example, and then I've got one other little one. So, pet food company has 2,500 products. Who knows what a SKU is?
It's what the numbers you use to scan.
Good. Yep. So you put
Which
in
plan
some of
is
that
it?
word. That's right. So that is the scanning number, that unique product identification number. So this pet food company has 2,500 products with 200 different formulas. Believes there's some economies of scope, but what about price? So Walmart tends to beat up its suppliers. I don't know if you guys know that. That kind of is in the news off and on. Another interesting thing about Walmart is when they go green, they kind of strong arm their suppliers into going green, and then they get the benefit of it. It's kind of one of their little secrets. So Walmart says, oh, we are saving, let's say, X% of recycled material or whatever. Well, they just went to their suppliers and said, listen, if you're going to sell at my store, you need to cut back on your material waste, and you need to give me a report that proves that you did it. Why? So that they can aggregate all that data and say, Walmart protects the environment. When really what they did is they kind of strong-armed their suppliers into being environmental. And then, of course, they throw in a couple lights and they alternate their lights to flopping, and so that they look. So it's a maneuver called greenwashing, where we can kind of give the perception. And I'm not saying they're terrible. I mean, Walmart has done more for the world in terms of low prices than just about any other company. So I don't want to get all anti-Walmart on it, but this is reality, right? You can kind of make those types of maneuvers. I mean, we buy lots of cheap stuff. If we aggregate all of our savings across the world, the amount of employment and everything that they've done, it's really amazing. So I kind of got in there. So they strong-armed this pet food place. And so the pet food place has an idea. They're going to shrink their offerings. So this one is kind of taking what we just did with economies of scope and kind of turning it around a little bit, because they're heading the other direction. For this particular company, what they found is that they were running all of these multiple products that they thought, well, I have a gymnasium, we can have volleyball, we can have basketball, we can have this, but they maybe didn't think about all what was going on in the production process in terms of the setup time. And so there's other costs that might be going on. In this particular case, again, this is just an example to get the juices flowing. By reducing the number of product offerings, they were able to eliminate these runtimes and reduce their costs, which then allowed them to sell their product at a reduced price to satisfy the threats that they were getting from Walmart, that they were from those suppliers. Okay? So this teeters on the other last concept we're going to talk about tonight, and that is economies of scale. So that was economies of scope. Economies of scale is kind of similar in that we're looking to reduce costs. But how we do it with economies of scale is we just increase quantity. So by increasing quantity, we're able to move down along the cost curve like we saw with the learning curve. By increasing the number of airplanes from 10 to 20 to 30, we see economies of scale. We're still just making airplanes, one product, but by producing more of them, we can enjoy economies of scale. So a reduction in cost that's due to increasing the scale of production. Economies of scope, decrease in cost by spreading out production, going to multiple products. So let me write out the economies of scale definition, because I want you to hang on something that tends to screw up students here on the definition. So economies of scale is a decrease in average cost due to an increase in quantity produced. And then we'll put kind of parentheses the scale of production. Sorry, Keith, I'll change to the board here real quick. Maybe I always look at the wrong person. So economies of scale, a decrease in average cost due to increasing the scale of production. We've seen this in a couple of our graphs, economies of scale. That's why I wanted to start with economies of scope. That one, the graph isn't easy to do because you got multiple products. But here with economies of scale, we have a long run average cost curve that looks like this maybe. And I drew this kind of goofy for a reason. So long run average cost. So as I increase the scale of production from 10 to 20 to 30, I have some decreases in average cost in the long run. Average costs are falling. That may not last forever though. That doesn't mean you can just keep building infinitely that you'll never, so it's likely that this might level off at some point. Now I snuck in the word long run here. So long run versus short run. Question mark. I think this has been in your reading, but it might not have been. So let me just put it out to you. Does anybody know the distinction on the long run versus the short run in economics class? And I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with time. Well, time is part of the answer, but it's not like 1 year is the long run and 3 years is long run. It has to do with what you factor into what?
Fixed cost.
Yep.
So basically, it's the point, the lowest point on that scale is like the side short run, and then once you hit that lower point, then you're long run.
No. So this curve here is showing all long run. So again, the distinction's not that, is not that part.
I remember one class you said something like, in the long run, all costs are variable.
Good, that's right. How are all costs variable in the long run? What are costs generated from? Fixed cost, variable cost, you guys have kind of been bouncing around the right thing. Where do fixed costs come from that they're fixed, or where do variable costs come from that they're variable? In the long run, all costs are variable.
I totally interpreted that the wrong way.
Did you? That's right. Well, now hopefully we'll get to the right one. So it comes back to the inputs. So when you have a fixed cost, it's because there was a fixed input, right? Potentially a fixed input. But in the long run, we can vary the size of our space and everything else. So in the long run, all costs are variable means that all inputs can vary. So the long run, all factors of production, all resources, whatever we call them, all inputs to the production process can vary. I'll use that word vary because then that triggers what you said. In the long run, all costs are variable because all inputs can vary. We can change the quantities of the inputs. In the short run, at least one thing is fixed. Today at the restaurant, the size of my grill is fixed. I can vary the labor, I can vary the hamburgers, but at least one thing is fixed. So in the short run, at least one input is fixed. Okay, so economies of scale is a long-run concept. So there's a decrease in long-run average costs due to an increase in the scale of production. So I'm going to add one more thing onto this picture. You guys can add it later. These are short-run average total cost curves. When we look at our pictures, we are looking at this average cost. We're in the short run. There's a marginal cost curve that cuts through the minimum. And what this is depicting is that if we choose, I like to use real estate partially because I was a real estate guy. If we're in a small manufacturing building, the average cost looks like this. if we get into a medium-sized facility, we can lower our costs. So if I'm making 30 units regularly in my manufacturing plant, I would be better off to be in the medium-sized building, right? Because the small building, there's just not enough room. Everybody's piled on top of each other, right? And so that drove up my average cost per unit. However, if I am in normally producing 20 units, kind of week after week is kind of my production amount, I'm better off being in the small building because the medium-sized building is a little too costly. I'm not pumping out enough units to justify that big of a building. And so my average cost would be higher. And so in the long run, I can pick any freaking size building I want, right? So I can be in the small, medium, or large, and I will do that as I grow. In the short run, I'll be trapped kind of on one of these, but in the long run, I can be anywhere. And so you're always going to be looking to be at your lowest cost possible, and that is the outer envelope of an infinite number of these curves. I only drew 3 of them, but if you can kind of imagine doing the square footage business, there's an optimal size building for my production process that minimizes cost. And that's what this long run average cost curve is. Okay, so that's kind of economies of scale, economies of scope. This little chapter is just about 4 pages long. Let me see here. Got this one question we're going to go back to, and then I think we are done. Yeah, I got to find Zoom here. There we go. Zoom. Share screen. Boom. Okay, and boom. And boom. Okay, got it. And boom. All right. So, economies of scale, learning curve, kind of similar in concept. The very first unit you make, marginal cost 64. The second, 32. The third, 21. The fourth, 16. The fifth, 13. The sixth, 11. If a potential project comes your way for 4 units, what is your break-even price? Now, this one you can kind of do in your head. You don't necessarily have to pull out some formula. But I want you to understand the problem. So thinking about this production process, this is the way the numbers shake out. If you only had to make 1 unit, it's going to cost you 64. The second runs you 32. The third, 21. The fourth, 16. Because there's economies of scale, the marginal cost curve is falling. Those additional units are looking like that. So somebody poses 4 units. 64. No, not quite. How would you calculate the break-even price? One thing is to calculate your costs. Is that what you're starting to do, Clay? What do you do? Okay, and divided by 4, so what'd you do? You're on the right track, it sounds like. Divide what by 4? I guess the key.
Oh, the total of those first 4.
Of the first 4.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? 64
Yeah,
plus 32. Okay. So what do we got here? 64 plus 32. What do we got? 96. 21. 96 plus 21. 121 short 4. 117. 117 plus 16. 27, 133, good, 133, and then what you do to figure out your break-even price per unit? Divided by 4. So it was your cost of each additional unit, but if you had to quote the price, that would be your break-even price, thinking about it that way. All right, so 48. Everybody get that?
Two more units or to make it 4-6?
So it's 2 more units on top of what we had already. So it'd be adding on the 5th and 6th unit. So what is your break-even price on those units? You get another project opportunity. It's a different deal. 2 more units.
You just do,
Tell me what you're doing. Yeah.
do
Tell me.
add 5 and 6.
Add 5th and 6th. So 13 plus 11, 24. And then what would you do?
Right, by the 2.
Divide by just the 2, right?
So you wouldn't do the whole thing over again with 6.
Not under this context, the way it's worded. After landing the 4-unit deal, a new person comes along and says you get another project opportunity for 2 units. What is your break-even price?
Because you're still already making them.
Exactly. So at the margin, those extra 2 units is only going to be the $12. All right. So there's our numbers, just like what you guys calculated. Here's the key, is if the first project was what's your break-even price for 6 units, your answer is different. Then it was kind of what I think you were going to do before. Again, all of this is trying to highlight for you that at the margin, things look different. As you're making decisions, things look different. So if you're looking to do 6 units, then your average price needed to be 26. With just 4 units, it was 33 to break even. This extra project comes along, it's just 12. And so each decision is unique depending on where you're at in the process currently. Woo! Okay, we made it another night. We're done. We are done. Okay, so we are quickly coming upon midweek stuff, and we need to do kind of a touch base quiz to see how you guys, an in-class quiz. It's gonna be kind of short, but let's see how you've been doing on the, so you